80% of our clients to date have come from existing client referrals. People love to reciprocate. So if you're providing value to someone, even if it's for free, they will either want to pay you, they would want to keep you, or they would want to recommend you. If you don't understand the fundamentals, you're only going to last as long as the trend lasts, and then you're out.
All right, Eric, welcome to my podcast. If you can introduce yourself to the audience, what do you do, what does Spec do, and generally your story.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Erik. I'm the co-founder of Spec, which is a digital advertising agency focused on high consideration products. So we do paid media management, and we run a creative studio focused on social first ads.
Awesome. All right, Eric. Since this podcast is majorly aimed at people who want to start their own agency, start their own company, so that's how this is going to go. So let's go back to day one of Spec, right? When you started the agency, what was the vibe like when you and your co-founder started, especially considering all the risks? Was there a certain spark or an idea that made you feel like this time this could actually work?
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to day one, I think we were young, we were just really excited. I don't think we saw too much risk, or were too afraid. We'd had some, like, we'd worked together in an in-house marketing team, so we'd sort of stress tested both our relationship, and we'd had some really great success there. So I think we were quite confident in our ability to achieve results together, and we knew that it was really fun working together. So it was mainly excitement, and it was mainly like feeling, we don't really have anything to lose. Let's just dive in here and see where it takes us. So I think yeah, it was excitement. There wasn't really anything that, stood out. Of course, there's always the fear of, like, what if we don't succeed? But when I think back to it, and maybe I'm glorifying it in hindsight, but when I think back to it, it's mainly excitement.
Awesome. Since your co-founder is your friend, there's this advice that we all get, right? The classic advice that never get into business with your friends. Did you happen to second guess yourself? And how did that dynamic work for you and Mans, your co-founder?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of people said that, like, never go into business with friends. And I think we listened to that. And I think, to be honest, what I told you about the excitement of getting started, and no fear on the commercial side of things, I do think we had a fear of could this impact our friendship negatively? Um, and we were very sort of upfront with each other about the expectations, why we were going into this, what we both wanted to get out of it. And we spent a week up in his parents' cabin in the north of Sweden, very isolated, and just really talked through all of the softer things that wouldn't necessarily go into a shareholders agreement. So we had sort of a way to, I guess, preempt potential conflicts. And we had the benefit of having worked together before. We'd studied together as well. So we kind of knew each other inside out, even professionally, right? So that made it pretty easy to do things like, list the things that bothered us with the other person. We actually made lists of, like, this is what annoys me in a professional situation. This is how you act when you get stressed. This is how that affects other team members, etc. So we just kind of, like, got it all out on paper. And funnily enough, doing that, even though I don't think any of us, like, have changed majorly, or like that either of us have changed any of our bad habits drastically or anything like that, I think having it out in the open between you makes it so that when these things are happening, when these behaviors are coming up, you're a little bit more understanding of it, and you know that your business partner knows what's going on now. They expect it, and they have some good ways of dealing with it, and they can sort of just remind you of, like, hey, you're doing that thing right now. And then it's much easier for you to not become defensive and just be like, right, that's already out in the open. I know that's a bad habit. I'm going to stop that right now. So I think that was important. But yeah, we definitely had that fear, and I think we're very proud now to have overcome that and sort of prove that you can do both things at the same time.
Yeah. So fast forward to today, you have worked with some major clients like Hanzaji, Desmond and Dempsey, LYMA. So was it a turning point where you thought, "Whoa, I have made it," or was it a steady climb to the place where you are right now?
Yeah, man. And no, I don't think there was, like, one moment we were like, we've made it. And honestly, I still don't really feel that way.
Okay.
I think someone said that building an agency is kind of like building a sandcastle. You're never really finished, and I think that's very true. For us, it was more of it's been a steady climb. Like, I think the way to build a good sustainable agency that will be here in 10 years from now is to have more linear growth and to try and really like be sure that you can serve those clients that you take on. And I think perhaps one moment, if I was going to pinpoint it, was what's that client Ansa G that you mentioned. I think it was one of the first times where we were actually in a competitive pitch where we were up against, I think, two or three other agencies. And before that, it had only been sort of referrals and straight into to making a deal. Um, but there it was a three-way competitive pitch. I knew that we were up against some really, solid London-based agencies that were way bigger than us. And when we won that, at least we had that feeling of like, yep, we're onto something here. We can compete with the best of them. So that was an exciting time.
Right, right. I also understand that from the conversations with other agency owners that starting out is the most challenging part. For someone aiming to land clients like yours, where do you think they should focus their energy on, and were there any specific actions that worked well for Spec?
Look, 80% of our clients to date have come from existing client referrals. So doing great work for existing clients that tell other clients, that's going to be it. The other 15, like 20% has come from referrals from our personal network. And I don't think that's super typical, but it's the road that we chose. I think especially in the beginning, over-indexing on really serving your clients well and providing more value than you capture before you start just tooting your own horn and doing too much marketing around yourself. That's the way we did it. Um, to me, that's always going to be the way that you grow in the right client circles as well. I think you can become a LinkedIn influencer and you can pitch a bunch of people before you really have provided value anywhere. But where's the substance and what are you actually putting in front of them once you have their attention, right? So we kind of did it the opposite way. We focused super hard on just really, really serving clients well. We didn't shout much about ourselves at all. I mean, for the first 2 or 3 years, we didn't even have a website. We just grew on referrals. So it's maybe a bit unorthodox, but it's really worked for us. And I think that way we built up a really good foundation of people that knew that we provided value, that knew we would deliver on what we said, and told other people about it. And that's how we've grown.
Awesome. That's actually an unorthodox approach, whereas all the agencies, at least these days, they market so much around themselves before providing value. Also, you've talked about finding the right partners before starting, right? But if you were to start from zero again, where you have no clients, no team, what would your first 30 days look like to acquire a client?
Okay. So I'm starting again. I have no clients. I have no team. What would my first 30 days look like? That's a good
Yeah,
question, man.
yeah.
Terrifying question. Look, I think what I do first and foremost, I'd be very diligent about finding out like an actual real problem, right? Like you need to talk to a bunch of it, like you need to talk to a bunch of marketeers if you have the ability to do that. Otherwise, you just need to go and do a hell of a lot of research and read up on what are some real and current problems that marketeers are facing right now. After that, I would probably start with a deck, right? If I have 30 days, there's not enough time to pull together a website or anything like that. But I would really work on that story, right? Like what how can I define this problem in a way that my audience, which is the marketeers that would hire my services, how can I define this problem so that they really understand that I understand their problem, right? Like you need to make them see that you really understand the fundamental parts of this problem and how it affects their day to day. Then you need a really compelling narrative of how you're going to solve that and why you're really well placed to solve that, right? So you need a little bit of the method that you would take to approach the problem and how you would solve it. And you need to give a little bit of credibility to, why are you the best person to do this? So get that into a really nice deck. Don't skimp on design. Like you got to make it look pretty, pretty, pretty sick. And then once I had that, I would have to go like personal or professional network. I think if you're an agency that is just starting out and you have no track record, there's got to be another element of trust in there, which I think you best get from someone that you've worked with. So like preferably in your professional network that knows that you're trustworthy, that you do what you say, that you deliver results. And if not that, perhaps a personal connection. If you don't have either of those, if you're very young and you're just starting out and you don't really have a professional network yet, um, I would probably focus on identifying one or two or three businesses where you think like you have an extra good fit. And I would honestly just start providing value to them. Like I think, perhaps a bit controversial advice. I think there's a lot of people out there that say that you should never give your services for free, you should never discount, et cetera, et cetera. And that may be true to a certain extent, but for me, I'd rather just go in and start providing value somewhere. And if you do that, don't worry too much about exactly what you're getting paid. If you're in a position to to make your bills, if you have 2 or 3 months before you really need to start earning cash, which I understand not everybody will be in that position, but if you are, focus on adding value to those clients, focus on actually solving that problem and proving it. If you do that, don't worry too much about the monetary upfront compensation for that. Instead, count on that if you really provide value for them, they will want to keep you once you say, hey, I've done this to you now for a long time or for a certain amount of time. You can see the value it's providing. Here's what I would like in return in terms of compensation. That's one of the aspects that will happen from that. The other thing is like people love to reciprocate. So if you're providing value to someone, even if it's for free, they will remember that. And if they got real value from you, they will either want to pay you, they would want to keep you, or they would want to recommend you. So I would say as long as you can just go in there and start showing what you can do if you don't already have the trust, that's where I would start. And then I think it will snowball from there.
Right, bro. This is actually gold advice. A lot of people these days just immediately just get their pitch deck ready, just send it over, send some cold emails, ask people, would you want the service? But it's providing value first before actually uh, you know uh, asking for payments. I think that's where
Okay.
you build your networks, right? Also, Eric, one thing I've always been curious about is your take on specializing. Do you think it's better to deep dive on a niche early on, or is it better to test different services until see until you really see what clicks?
Yeah. A great question. You have good questions, man. I think it depends a little bit on what your starting point is. Okay. So for my co-founder and I, we were more like we were generalist marketeers. Like he was more into data and numbers and paid media. I was a bit more into comms and creativity. But we didn't have like a very singular skill set where we knew exactly like this is what we're going to specialize in. So for us, it made a ton of sense to go out and try a bunch of different services. We started with very high level strategic services like big strategy projects, A to C, like doing a complete digital turnaround project or a complete digital acceleration project for big clients. Um, and then after a while, like as we were going, we started seeing which aspects, because we had a direct ear with the decision makers, the founders of these companies. We started seeing what other issues they had, and we started seeing what out of all of those things that we provided added the most value and that we felt the most comfortable doing, and that we felt we were the best at delivering. Right. So for us, it worked really well to start broad and then hone in on a specialized service. Um, However, if you're starting out and let's say you're starting an agency off the back of having run another agency, so you really already honed some of that, or you're coming out from a specialist function within a marketing team, and your sort of differentiator is that this skill or this discipline, let's say it's SEO or paid media or whatever it is, right? That you feel like you have a superpower in, then go for it and specialize early. I think you gotta, the earlier you can specialize, the easier it will be to find the right clients. I can sometimes think that if we would have specialized a bit earlier than we did, we would have been even further now. But I think, yeah, it depends on your starting point. We couldn't have gone in and specialized right away because there wouldn't have been, we wouldn't have known what to specialize in.
Makes sense. So it's better to start off testing some services, and then once whichever clicks, it's better to hone in on that.
Exactly.
Understood. So also you mentioned before how being different is what sets Spec apart, right? So what's one thing you'd say that has made your agency stand out, and how did you discover that secret sauce?
And good one. I think, look, if I could only say one thing that has sort of rung true for Spec throughout the years, um, I think that Mons and I and the people that work with us, everybody is sort of an overachiever in a natural way, like in a natural way. Like I think the way that plays out is like everybody who works with us take their success and thereby the client success extremely seriously and extremely personally. And I think clients notice that. I think sometimes in our field of like when you're an agency, you're sort of renting someone out to another client and to another business, and it sometimes feels a bit detached. So you really got to have people that really, really give a shit about their work and that really, really want to see those results, not only for the client's sake, not only for spec's sake, but for their own sake, and that they're proud of seeing good work and good results. And I think that made us stand out really early from an agency point of view. If we talk about positioning and how other people look in, I think once we landed on our proposition of that, our speciality is that we're quite strategic, right? Everybody that works with us are broad marketeers that don't only understand paid media or creative, but that can look at things with from a bigger picture. And when you have that, you can take on a lot more complicated services and products, which is what we're doing, right? And I think when sometimes if you're a paid marketeer and if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and you try to solve everything with the same tactics for no matter which brand or product it is. I think if you're talking about a secret sauce or something like that, our secret sauce would be that we can we don't have one singular formula that we try and apply to everyone, but we are deeply strategic in that we can define the issues or the challenges that different clients in different sectors face because they have a really high price point or a really complex product or brand that they need to explain, and whatever that is, we can then design a custom strategy to solve for that. And I think that has become a bit of our secret sauce, that we're quite flexible and agile to different products and different industries.
Right, right. Interesting. Also, the next question is something that I really, really want to know. So, when building your team, what kind of people do you look for? Like, are you more focused on skills or values? And how do you ensure your team, the team member who's coming in, gels with the specs culture?
Yeah, good one. I mean, if we talk high level, what do we look for when we hire someone? There's two things that we're looking for. We want, number one, natural born overachievers, and number two, people who are intelligent and get the bigger picture. And so if I break those down, when I talk about natural born overachievers, what I look for, and you can ask people who's been recruited with us, I go a lot into like early days of their life, what motivated them, what motivated them to do well in school, what brought them to do their first job, why in their daily life now, what makes them proud, how do they think about achievement? Because I think that's an incredibly important aspect of it. I think if you're not self-motivated and if you're not really taking sort of an intrinsic pride in the work that you do and the effort that you put out, it's going to be really hard for us to trust that they will do that, especially being a mainly remote company, right? You just got to have people who are doing good work for themselves as much as for us and for our clients. So that's number one. And the other thing is being intelligent and getting the bigger picture. I think it has to do with the type of clients that we serve. If you're not a strategic marketeer, if you don't understand the bigger picture of what you're doing and that you're truly intelligent, it's going to be very hard for you to serve our type of clients because we don't have a sort of one size fits all mold that we just apply to a bunch of clients. I think you can maybe do that if you're working with lower priced, consumer goods that are way more simple and way more sort of cookie cutter, right? For us, you need someone who can take on a challenge, take on a problem, and really understand the bigger picture. And I think the second benefit of having those types of people is that when the landscape changes, which it does all the time, right? You're not too stuck with people who are just specialists in a certain area, but you have a team that can adapt and you have a team that can take on new tools and apply them to new trends and make sure that you stay current.
Right, right. I'm going to keep this in mind. A natural born overachiever. Number two is someone who's intelligent and gets the bigger picture. Understood. Also, you've told 80% of your clients were from already existing client referrals, right? But I'm sure while starting out, you must have done some kind of client outreach. It could be cold outreach, emails, so what worked for you in the beginning while getting your first client? For instance, I usually do email outreach and cold calls. But what did you do as when Spec was at its inception?
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, we actually didn't do any cold outreach whatsoever in the beginning. We did some lukewarm outreach, if you will, meaning like I would hit up people in my network that I'd worked with before, etc. But it was never a hard pitch. We didn't really. I don't know if it was that we didn't feel comfortable doing it or that we just sincerely wanted to work with people who already had a little bit of a belief in what we could do so that we got the time to operate. I think a lot of the things we're doing, especially back then, was more medium to long term strategy of things. And I think if you're going to do that, you got to have someone who's open to change. You got to have someone that trusts you a bit already. And I just didn't see how I was going to get that while cold pitching someone completely out of the blue with an agency that didn't have any track record. So yeah, believe it or not, we didn't do any cold outreach at all. We hit up our network, and we were lucky to get a few hits on that, and started to do some great work for two or three clients. I'm still very grateful to the people who took a chance on us in those early days, because it that's what set everything off, and gave us the confidence to continue. So yeah, no cold outreach. We went straight in for network, and then once we had some success with that, they were kind enough to tell other people about it, and that's how we grew.
True, true. Interesting, interesting. Also, in one of your articles, you that was published on Forbes, you spoke about being upfront with difficult conversations before
Mhm.
starting a business, right? So, do you take the same approach with clients? How do you manage conflicts or misaligned interests, misaligned expectations?
Yeah, another great question. Yeah, I know I talk about that in the Forbes article. I think the way that applies to clients, I think you gotta be responsible when you pitch clients, and I think what we try to keep in mind is to focus on our method and what we've achieved for other people, as opposed to over promising a bunch of stuff about their business, when the truth of the matter is we don't know exactly what we can do for them until we've been there long enough to do a strategy, understand their data and everything. And I think we're trying to be quite upfront about that. Of course, you want to give you want to give your agency, you want to shine your agency in a bright light, but I think you do that by showing facts of what you've done in the past, as opposed to making stuff up about the future. So that's one way we try to be diligent in the selling process. In terms of having conversations up front, we have a quite laborious onboarding. So we spend a month on onboarding with our clients, which is a mix of us getting to know them and understand their audience and their data and their team and everything. But it's also the point of them understanding us and our processes and what we can do and not do. And in there are several conversations where we sort of show, here's things that are in scope, here are things that are not in scope, and here are things that are in the gray zone. Because, I think there's a large number of things that fall into the gray zone in a client agency relationship. And we're going to always try to over deliver, right? We always want to try and help with those gray zone stuff, but there's got to be a little bit of a give and take relationship, where sometimes they also understand that they're asking for too much, and can take a step back. So I think that's a very important conversation to have, and establish a sort of give and take relationship up front, and be really clear about what's certainly not in scope and what's more in that sort of gray zone.
Right, right, right. So also now let's talk about work-life balance, right? As someone who's built a successful business and worked with huge clients, how do you keep your own mental health and creativity in check? How do you do that?
Yeah. Difficult one, right? I think one tool I have is running. I love running. I love sort of long distance running with a great mixtape, and I it's sort of part exercise and part meditation for me. I get into a flow where everything is sort of shut off from the outside world, and I just run, and I don't really think. It's I just sort of exist. And how, like, I understand that sounds a bit ethereal, but it's really helped to like slow the brain down a little bit sometimes, and get out of this sort of always on feeling that is sort of default mode, I think, when you're a founder. And then I'd say the other thing is I have a super supportive partner, romantic partner, that she's an extremely good listener, and she will let me vent. And she works in the agency space as well, so she can really understand frustrations with clients or employees or whatever it may be, right? And I think it's really important to have someone that is as patient as she is, and can listen to your whining, so that you can get it out sometimes, which I think is important.
Understood. I also do jiu-jitsu, that is that is like a place where I go out and vent, and just like how you have running, right? So I do jiu-jitsu, compete there. So also, do you do marathons?
Oh,
I'm just
amazing, man.
curious.
No,
Okay,
not yet. Not
okay,
yet. Still waiting for my first.
right, right.
Have you?
No, no, no. I've tried Ironman once in Goa. I couldn't even finish 10% of it. So I just went in without any preparation. I just competed. So uh,
Oh, really? You just went in cold, you just went in without preparation for marathon? That's amazing, man.
yeah, yeah. I'm sure this is going to end soon, right? Okay. Let's say there's a 22-year-old guy, and he knows the basics of digital marketing, and he wants to start his own agency. What's the first thing that he should focus on in the first year to build momentum?
Look, right now there's a bunch of hyped trends, right, where bigger businesses will feel like they're falling behind. So if you want to start an agency and the goal is just to get quick momentum, I would really do my research and figure out like, okay, what are some things that bigger businesses right now are feeling a bit left behind on? Is it AI? Is it creative strategy? Is it is it the marriage between data and creativity? Like whatever that is, pinpoint that and do an offering that you can somehow back up with your skill set, but at the same time just some sort of, if you're 22, you got to compensate for the lack of experience with energy, right? You got to be super enthusiastic. You got to work twice as hard as anyone else. You got to learn more about this new topic or new subject so that you become super knowledgeable on it. And that way I think you can get a bigger business or a bigger client to take a chance on you and to allocate a bit of budget for that and think of it more as a little bit of an experiment than necessarily this big bet that is going to change everything. And if you do that and you get a foot through the door by being in this new and exciting area that everybody wants to understand more about, and they trust you to be the one that can lead the way and open some doors, then I think you can really strike gold. And I think you could build momentum quite quickly, because if you're just then, what we talked about before, if you provide real value for them and you're giving them real insight, and you can help a CMO that is feeling like he or she doesn't have time to keep up with all these trends, but they're seeing more and more about it, more and more people are asking them about it and want them to have an opinion about it. And you have your little sort of golden goose that keeps feeding you insight, that keeps doing exciting stuff, that keeps your sort of marketing team on their toes. I think that's the way I would try to do it. Try and like identify that trend, try to become a specialist in it really quickly, because you're lucky in that there aren't many specialists on it if it's completely new, and then you build it from there. But always with real substance, right? And I've talked about this before. It can't just be the hype. You got to understand the marketing fundamentals behind it and apply those. And then that way you can switch to trend or you can jump on different trains. But if you don't understand the fundamentals, you're only going to last as long as the trend lasts, and then you're out, right?
Understood. Okay, and this is the next question is a bit interesting, right? So let's say a person wants to start an agency, and what should he do after watching this podcast? What is the first thing he do? He
Oof.
or she?
What's the first thing? Look, I think make a list of people that you know, or your parents know, or your friends know, that you think have done something impressive, or that you look up to. And it doesn't have to be that they've started an agency themselves. They can just, like, I think it's great if they're entrepreneurs, but even if they just had a successful career or something that you look up to, make a list of them, make a really humble outreach, and ask for 15 minutes of their time to ask a bunch of questions about what you should be thinking around. And you'd be surprised how many people, actually get honored by a question like that, and we really put in an effort to try and give you some good advice. And you're not going to find all your answers, but you're definitely going to get some good sort of golden insights, or some cookie crumbles to follow that will lead to bigger insights along the way. And I think another thing that is important to remember, that if you're humble and you're actually listening to their advice, and you can show them how their advice has impacted your journey and how it's helped you, they're very likely to want to keep on helping you, because now they're invested into your success, and everybody loves seeing how their advice led to an improvement in someone else's life. So that's probably the first thing I would do. Gather some advice from your wiser elders, and take that to heart. Actually listen to it, and then make a bit of a game plan, and check in with them again.
Right. Understood. Understood. I am actually going to do this immediately after the podcast.
Great. I'm glad, man. I think that's a good shout.
Thank you, Eric. So we are at the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm really grateful, and I'm definitely 100% sure everybody who watches this will get a ton of value. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Ravi. Some really great questions here, and yeah, I'm
Right.
super excited to have been on, and hope it can be helpful for someone.